So today Nikon released a firmware that improves the Z9's capability on a number of aspects, and most of those things are really not significantly dependent on the hardware. At least they don't seem like. They are basically beautiful augmentation of the capabilities that the Z9 already has. And I'd like to emphasize or call out three such features. Of course, you can go through the long list of feature improvements, or you can look at other videos, but I think there are three main things that make this firmware update significant. And while this is a small step for the Z9, this is perhaps a massive step for Nikon overall. So let's get started with it. The first thing is what Nikon have done with video recording. So what they have done is they have essentially added high frequency flicker reduction to the video recording menu. So as you can see, you go to the video recording menu and you can switch on high frequency flicker reduction, depending on what part of the world you are. uh, if you are in a mixed lighting situation, if there are LED or other sort of lights which are not under your control, you can now actually customize your shutter speed and figure out at what shutter speed you get the cleanest footage. So that's remarkable because it just increases your flexibility in terms of shooting videos in locations where you cannot actually have prepared lighting. So I think that's makes the camera very flexible. And like I said, this I don't think this requires special hardware. This just requires software tweaking, and I think this can easily be pushed to the Z6 II, the Z7 II, or even cameras like the Z30, which is specially made for filmmakers and vloggers who are will be shooting in situations where the lighting is not always perfect. So I think this feature should definitely be pushed out to other cameras as well. Similarly, let's talk about the high res zoom feature, and I'm going to run a footage here where you can see both how the flicker reduction gets reduced and how the high res zoom works. Let's look at the footage. And so as you can see, flicker reduction really works well, and also the high res zoom function really beautifully done by Nikon. I think it turns all of your zoom lenses in potentially into uh, turns all of your prime lenses potentially into zoom lenses when it comes to video. And there's a smoothness about its operation that I think it's difficult to uh, sort of emulate when you actually rotating a there's this smoothness about this zoom feature, crop in zoom feature, that is hard to imitate when you're actually physically zooming in on a zoom lens. I think so. This is a very powerful feature. This really unlocks the power of 8K video sensor, because essentially now the camera is going to use all the resolution to crop in losslessly in a 1080p footage or a 4K footage. So this is really powerful. One observation about it is that you should, like a one observation is, I think you should customize the eye menu accordingly. You should customize the eye menu so that you can, assign one of the boxes to three different zoom speeds. However, in my experience, the zoom speeds, when I changed them, it didn't really matter much. They all, to me, it felt the same. So I think on further inspection and further detailed usage, I'll be able to understand the differences between them. And that's true for all the features, because it's just been a few hours and none of us actually had the time to test out those features extensively on field. Now, the third big feature, simple feature, is how Nikon has unlocked the potential of the screen. So if you look at it, what Nikon has done essentially is allowing me to increase the brightness of the screen much higher on the field. So if you're shooting using the Z9 on a bright day outside, this can almost replace, not almost, this can surely replace a field monitor, because now you can really push the brightness up that much. And similarly, in low light conditions or in dark nights, when you need to when you don't want a lot of light, you can, or you don't want to attract attention, you can reduce the brightness of the screen further down, and also as a byproduct of that, save a lot of battery. So I think this is an amazing feature, and I think at least even if there are limitation to how bright these Z6 and Z7 screens can get, I think at least it can definitely dim down further. It can definitely dim down further in dark lighting conditions and save some battery. I think that can easily happen. So it can be done, and I think it should be pushed to these cameras as well. The last big feature that I think should be pushed to all cameras is actually allowing the camera to format a card fully, and by doing that increasing the longevity of the cards, no matter what kind of card it is. I think this should be standard in all cameras, and kudos to Nikon for having done it on the Z9. Essentially what a format does instead of a quick format is that it can detect the bad sectors on your chip or on your memory card, and it can manage it better. It can, if there are abnormalities in the card, if there are bad sectors that could actually reduce the capacity of the card over a long time, this full formatting will ensure that all of those problems are ironed out, and it's all sort of straightened out, and you have the card in full and healthy condition. So that this is a feature I think should be again unlocked in all cameras. I don't know what could be the bottleneck. Should, is it a hardware thing? I don't think so. I think it's a coding thing, and I think this should be allowed, and this will really increase the life of especially those cars that are not as expensive and as durable as the CF Express cards that you have on the Z9. So although this feature has been unlocked on the Z9, and I understand these are expensive cards, these are supposed to be fast cards, and you need these cards to be operating at highest efficiency possible, but this feature is relevant for all cards across. So I think that should be done by Nikon. And apart from this, there are other features that I think I'm quite excited about. Before I move into autofocus, which Nikon sort of tucked down in the list somewhere as if it's not a big deal, and I'll talk about why it is a big deal. But before I get into the autofocus updates, let's talk about one very small but very significantly important thing, is that changing the color of the 3D tracking box. Now, currently the 3D tracking box is white, but if there is a white wall or something, if the subject is white in color, very light in color, it can be difficult to see exactly where the focus point is. So therefore it makes sense to have a focus box which contrasts in nature. So red I think works well. How it works is now you can turn the box into red, but the moment it acquires focus, it will turn into a green box. So that's really well done. And in darker situations, where in low light situations where the scene is overall darker and more contrasty, you can go back to the white box again. I don't think any other camera brand actually is doing this, so I think this is really good. And I'll tell you why the autofocus changes are important, although they're sort of tucked down in the list in Nikon's press release. I recently used the R5, right? I recently used the R5. I took it for a trip and I used it for about 5 days or so. And with the 85 1.2 from Canon RF, what I noticed is that the R5 was really accurate, really consistent, especially when it comes to human eye detection. And while and no matter what kind of lighting condition, the R5 always gets the eye. No matter if the person is between two, let's say the person is in between two pillars, right? You have a massive architecture somewhere, the person can be seen in between two pillars. I have seen the Z9 get confused in broad daylight. I'm not saying it has happened very often, but it has happened. With the R5, it did not happen at all. It was very confident, It was very sort of, it just stuck onto the eye. It found the eye with a lot of surety, and then it stuck to the eye with a lot of surety and confidence, and just kept being very sticky on the eye in low light situations. Whereas I had to actually put the 3D tracking box on the face, and then the camera would detect the eye in some situations on the Z9. In some situations, I'm not saying always. So it just felt that the Z9 is almost 100% there. But if you're using these two cameras side by side, I'm saying this. How long did I used it? I have used these two cameras for together at a stretch for 3 full days together. Like, I have both these cameras, one with the Z9 with 105 1.4 adapted, and the R5 with, there's the R5 with that 85 1.2 native. So, and 3 full days, right? And I felt as if, it's a feeling, I felt as if the R5 did a better job. But when I looked at the images, frankly, I did not see much difference. I felt as if I needed to spend a fraction of a second more on ensuring that I'm getting the subject in focus. And if that feeling exists, I think there is scope for improvement. There's no two ways about it. So when Nikon says that they have improved low light autofocus performance, I buy that, and I think it is important. It is good that they have done it. Instead of many of us saying, "Oh, fantastic, no one can beat Z9," I think Nikon thinks the Z9 can be improved. And if you are aware of the recent launch from Sony, the A7R5, you know that Sony is not resting on its laurels, and they're pushing the barriers and making their autofocus system even better, right? So Nikon have also lowered the minimum level of illumination required. Basically in low light conditions, the Z9 will do fine in a situation where the light levels are half a stop lower than it can do currently. So let's say if it's great for -6 stops or -7 stops, now it will be great for -6.5 stops or -7.5 stops. I don't exactly know what's the negative EV limit for this camera. I have to check that. Now, second is the second significant improvement is Nikon's overall tendency to focus on the background. I think Nikon, that this happens with most Nikons, and I've heard even Z9 users complain that at times, if you're shooting the birds, at times it just focuses in the background. At times, if the background is very bright or looks, I don't know, it just at times focus shifts. I did not face it. I faced it in low light conditions. I faced that issue in low light conditions where the focus box would sort of bounce around like a very truant child. It just bounce around. It will be difficult to sort of tame it and get it to focus on the subject. But if that tendency of focusing on the background has been reduced, then I think again it's a very significant, important improvement for the Z9. And then, of course, they've said that the animal eye detect autofocus has been improved as well. So overall, I think this is a very meaty, healthy upgrade for the Z9. And like I said, very few significant changes have been made, that although it has come in the Z9, I think these are significant capability improvements for the Nikon Z ecosystem as a whole. And I'd really like to see all of these things trickle down to the other cameras. This is time, Nikon. This is time. And well, it's October. We didn't get a camera, but I think the market and your consumers deserve some of these things. For example, really, I mean, let's look at high res zoom. Uh, any camera that does 4K should be able to do high res zoom, right? In 1080, it's not impossible at all. So I think Nikon should allow it to happen. For example, for the Z6 II and the Z7 II, up to 4K 30 high res zoom should not be a problem at all. So I would say Nikon, just look into the matter, and if possible, allow these things to be uh, trickled down to the rest of the camera bodies. Okay, so and that's where I'm going to leave today, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you enjoyed this conversation, if you enjoyed this chat, do subscribe and give this video a like. So I mostly talk about Nikon, but I also include a lot of Sony and a lot of Fuji into the conversation. I'm trying to also bring in a cross comparative understanding of Canon as well. And I'm generally someone who loves shooting, loves filming, just loves cameras and lenses overall. So if you like to be part of this stories, do like to subscribe. I'm going to see you soon with another one. Also, one other feature that I loved about this firmware update is that now the Z9's display button and the exposure compensation button, these two buttons can be customized, and you can assign any other function to these two buttons as you like, which increases the number of customizable buttons to +2. Now I think again that is one thing that should be done on the other cameras, because intuitively I always wanted one other button to be customizable up here for the Z6 too, for the Z6. And I'm sure you feel the same way if you have a Z7 or the Z7 too. So I think the display button on the other camera should also be customizable. At the same time, I have always also intuitively looked for the exposure compensation button to be customizable, but it is not right now. But I think this could be done. In fact, in another video that I'm going to make very soon, I'm going to talk about how Sony has actually made much better use of the camera real estate in some of its bodies. So I think this is again something that Nikon can apply on the other bodies as well.